The council chambers stretched across an area larger than most cities, filled with beings from hundreds of worlds who had never known war among themselves until humanity arrived, or so they claimed. Now, as they gathered to pass judgment, Ambassador Daniel Carter stood alone on the platform that jutted out into the center of the massive chamber, his hands clasped behind his back as he faced the accusations that would doom his species to isolation. Speaker Corix rose from the central throne, his crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns across the walls as he addressed the assembly with a voice that echoed like breaking glass. The human species has expanded too rapidly, colonized too aggressively, and militarized too extensively, Corix declared. His words met with approving murmurs from the assembled representatives. Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped his heart. "We have only settled uninhabited worlds," he said, looking up at the towering aliens surrounding him on all sides. "Our military exists solely for defense against pirates and natural threats. We have traded fairly and contributed our scientific discoveries freely to this council." A serpentine delegate from the Shrathi Empire hissed her disagreement, her hood flaring wide as she spoke. "You breed too quickly, expand too fast. Your very nature threatens the stability we have maintained for 10,000 cycles." Daniel wanted to argue that stability built on stagnation was not worth preserving, that humanity's energy and innovation could benefit everyone. But he could see the decision had already been made before he ever entered this chamber. The vote came swiftly, overwhelmingly against humanity. Corix announced the sentence with cold finality. Humanity had 30 standard cycles to withdraw from all colonies beyond the Sol system. Any human vessel found outside the designated quarantine zone would be destroyed without warning, and Earth, along with its immediate stellar neighbors, would be sealed behind an impenetrable barrier. Governor Lisa Hammond watched the skies of New Arizona turn dark with evacuation ships. The agricultural paradise she had spent 15 years building now abandoned to whatever species the council deemed worthy of claiming it. Families boarded transports with whatever possessions they could carry, children crying as they left the only homes they had ever known, parents trying to stay strong while their hearts broke at the injustice of it all, and the research stations orbiting distant stars. Human scientists systematically destroyed their work rather than let the council seize discoveries that had cost decades and countless resources to achieve. The 30 cycles passed in a blur of desperate retreats and bitter farewells. President Kevin Marshall stood in the observation deck of the orbital station above Earth, watching with Daniel Carter as the council activated their quantum barrier, the device that would imprison 12 human star systems behind walls of twisted spacetime. The stars began to disappear one by one, replaced by a shimmering curtain of energy that cut humanity off from the galaxy they had only begun to explore. "They fear what we could become," Kevin said quietly, his jaw tight with suppressed rage. Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes tracking the shrinking view of the cosmos. "Then we will become it where they cannot see." 5 years crawled by within the barrier. 5 years of the galaxy forgetting about the troublesome humans locked away in their corner of space. 5 years of the council congratulating themselves on averting what they saw as an existential threat. But beyond the barrier's edge, in an asteroid facility so carefully hidden that no council sensor could detect it, Commander Ryan Torres sat at his console watching data stream in from hundreds of secret observation posts. These ancient human probes had been launched decades before the exile, sent on trajectories that would take them to the far reaches of the galaxy over centuries of travel. And they had been far beyond council space when the barrier activated. Now they fed information back to Ryan through channels the council did not even know existed. Quantum-entangled particles that could not be intercepted or blocked. Ryan smiled grimly as he compiled reports on council fleet movements, trade routes, political developments, and 1,000 other details that would prove invaluable in the years to come. He encrypted the data and sent it through this underground network to the hidden facilities where humanity's best minds worked on technologies the Council had never imagined in laboratories. Carved into asteroids and tucked into nebulae, scientists worked without the restrictions that had always hampered their research within Council space. They developed ships slipped through dimensions the Council did not know existed, weapons that could disable without destroying, sensors that could see across light years without betraying their location. Ryan opened a priority channel and composed a simple message to the Directorate, the shadow government that now ruled humanity from the darkness between stars. Phase 1 complete. The shadows are ours. The Council thinks us contained, but we see everything they do. We are ready to begin Phase 2. He sent the message and leaned back in his chair, looking at the screen that showed the barrier still glowing around human space. That prison wall the Council had built to contain what they feared. They had no idea that the barrier was not keeping humans in, it was keeping the Council's eyes away from what humanity was building in the vast darkness beyond, in another hidden facility thousands of light years from Earth. Volunteers lined up to undergo procedures that would change them at the genetic level, transforming them into perfect mimics of other species. These brave men and women would become ghosts walking among the aliens, gathering intelligence and establishing networks that would span the galaxy. Nicole Price was one of the first to volunteer. The young trader had spent her whole life dreaming of exploring alien worlds, and now she would do exactly that, just not in the way she had once imagined. The transformation took months of painful treatments. Her DNA rewritten strand by strand until her reflection showed a half-Talarian hybrid rather than the human woman she had been. She memorized her new identity, practiced the cultural mannerisms, learned to think and speak as the characters she would play for years or perhaps decades to come. When the procedure was complete and she looked at herself in the mirror, seeing purple-tinted skin and elegant ridges where smooth human features had been, she felt a moment of grief for the face she was leaving behind. But then she remembered the children crying as they evacuated New Arizona, remembered her sister's tears when the barrier cut Earth off from the colony world where her family had made their home. Nicole straightened her shoulders and left the medical facility, heading for the small ship that would carry her through a carefully mapped gap in the barrier's quantum field. She would be the first of thousands. Human agents scattered across the galaxy, like seeds waiting to grow into something the Council never expected. Admiral Eric Young stood on the bridge of the Nightfall, humanity's first completely undetectable warship, looking out at the fleet assembling around him in the void between galaxies. 50 vessels hung in the darkness, each one incorporating technology decades ahead of anything the Council possessed. Each one crewed by men and women who had sacrificed everything to build this force in secret. All ships report ready, his executive officer announced. Eric nodded and gave the order that would begin humanity's true emergence from exile. Take us into Council space. Reconnaissance pattern Delta. Stay invisible and observe everything. If you encounter civilians in danger, you are authorized to intervene, but leave no evidence of our presence. The Nightfall slipped into subspace along with its sister ships, disappearing from normal space without the energy signature the Council sensors would detect. They were ghosts now, phantoms haunting the galaxy, and the Council would never know they were there until the moment humanity chose to reveal themselves back on Earth behind the barrier. Children grew up hearing stories of the exile, learning to hate the injustice, but also learning patience. Their time would come. Humanity would return to the stars. But they would do it in a way that ensured they could never be exiled again. They would become indispensable, protectors operating from the shadows, saving Council lives and proving through actions that humanity deserved its place among the stars. The exile was not an ending. It was merely the beginning of something far greater than the Council could possibly imagine. 10 years had passed since the Council sealed humanity behind their quantum barrier. 10 years of congratulating themselves on containing the threat. 10 years of redistributing the trade routes and resources that humans had once accessed. The galaxy moved forward as if humanity had never existed. The Council's official histories already beginning to rewrite the narrative to make the exile seem like a necessary and compassionate act. But strange things were happening in the depths of space. Incidents that the Council could not explain. A science vessel investigating a nebula in Sector 7 disappeared from all sensors. Search teams found the ship 3 days later, drifting intact but completely abandoned. Every data core wiped clean, and every crew member simply gone. Similar disappearances followed across 3 sectors over the next month. Ships found empty but undamaged. Their crews vanished without distress signals or signs of struggle. And each time, the only clue was an energy signature that matched no known technology in Council databases on Crosspoint Station, a massive free port where traders from 100 species conducted business far from Council oversight. A woman who called herself Nicole Vang operated a small cargo hauling business. Her manifest listed her as half Delarian and half Rix. An unremarkable hybrid, doing unremarkable work moving supplies between stations. Exactly the kind of person who blended into the background of galactic commerce. But in the hidden compartment beneath her ship's cargo bay, Nicole Price sat at a communication console coordinating a network of human agents, scattered across 50 systems. Each agent had undergone the same transformation she had. Their DNA rewritten to disguise them as other species. Their identities carefully constructed and supported by falsified records inserted into Council databases by human hackers operating from the shadow. Facilities. Agent 7 reports Council fleet movements. In the Outer Rim, one of her contacts transmitted through the encrypted channel. 3 dreadnoughts heading toward the Krull border. Nicole logged the information and forwarded it to the Directorate analysts who would compile it with thousands of other observations to build a complete picture of Council military operations. The network had taken 5 years to establish. 5 years of careful infiltration and patient positioning. And now thousands of modified humans lived and worked throughout Council space. Invisible among the aliens who had exiled their species, Jason Webb worked in the Council archives on the Capital World. His modified appearance, showing him as a scholarly archon with the characteristic elongated skull and pale skin of that species. His job was to catalog historical documents. Tedious work that gave him access to information most beings never saw 3 months into his deep cover assignment. Jason discovered something that made his blood run cold, buried in classified files from 20 years ago. He found evidence that the Council had secretly seized all human research on exotic matter and faster than light technology before activating the barrier. The jump drives that now powered every Council vessel. The technology they claimed to have developed themselves over centuries was based entirely on human innovations that had been stolen during the exile. Jason encrypted the files and sent them through the network to Nicole, who forwarded them immediately to the Directorate with a priority flag. This was exactly the kind of evidence humanity needed. Proof that the Council had not only exiled them unjustly, but had profited from theft of their technology far beyond the edge of explored space. In facilities hidden among dead systems and rogue planets, human scientists worked with a freedom they had never known under Council observation. Dr. Helen Cruz stood in the laboratory aboard Haven Station, watching her team test the latest advancement in cloaking technology. The device could render an entire station invisible to every form of detection the Council possessed, bending space itself around the facility until it simply did not exist in normal space-time. Power consumption is within acceptable limits, her assistant reported. Studying the readouts, we can maintain the field indefinitely, Helen smiled, thinking of all the impossible things they had accomplished in exile, without council regulations restricting their research, without bureaucrats questioning every experiment. Human innovation had exploded into breakthrough after breakthrough. They had ships that could travel through subspace without leaving the energy trails council sensors detected. Weapons that could disable vessels without destroying them. Medical technology that could heal injuries in hours instead of weeks, and they had kept all of it secret, using their intelligence network to ensure the council never suspected that humanity had not only survived exile but had thrived beyond anything the aliens had imagined possible. Admiral Eric Young reviewed the latest reports from his reconnaissance fleet. The Nightfall and her sister ships had been operating in council space for 5 years without a single detection. They had observed battles, natural disasters, pirate raids, and political upheavals, always watching from the shadows, never revealing themselves until last week. The colony world of refuge had come under attack by Krell raiders, the insectoid species from beyond the rim that recognized no law but strength. The small council garrison had been overwhelmed in hours, and the civilian population faced death or slavery, with the nearest council fleet days away from arriving. Commander Sarah Mitchell aboard the destroyer Phoenix had sent an urgent request to Admiral Young. Permission to intervene. Eric had authorized it immediately, knowing it meant risking exposure, but unable to stand by while innocents died. The Phoenix and 3 other human ships had decloaked above refuge and engaged the Krell with devastating precision, their weapons disabling raider vessels without killing crews, their shields absorbing attacks that should have destroyed them. The battle lasted 30 minutes. The Krell fled in disarray, and the human ships vanished back into subspace before the arriving council fleet could get clear sensor readings, but they had been seen, and they had saved 12,000 lives. Nicole received the priority alert while loading cargo on Crosspoint Station. The network was buzzing with reports of phantom ships that had appeared at refuge and fought like nothing the council had ever encountered. She immediately contacted her superior agents, instructing them to monitor council communications for any mention of the incident. Within hours, reports came flooding in. The council was in chaos trying to explain what had happened. Some officials claimed it was an unknown species. Others suggested experimental technology. A few even whispered that it might have been humans, but were dismissed as paranoid fools. Lieutenant Commander Karen Lopez, a council officer assigned to analyze the refuge battle data, noticed something the others had missed. For a fraction of a second before the phantom ships disappeared, her sensors had detected a transmission in an ancient Earth language. The message was simple: for those who cannot defend themselves. Karen took her findings to her superior, Security Director Rixton, a reptilian officer known for his methodical approach to investigations. Rixton studied the evidence carefully, his scaled face betraying no emotion as he correlated the refuge incident with dozens of unexplained events over the past few years. Ships disappearing and reappearing, pirates mysteriously eliminated, aid appearing at disaster sites before official responders could arrive, and now combat vessels using technology the council did not possess. I believe humanity never truly left, Rixton said quietly to Karen. I believe they have been operating in our space for years, building something we cannot see. Karen felt a chill run down her spine, knowing that if Rixton was correct, everything the council believed about the exile was wrong. More incidents followed the Battle of Refuge, each one showing the same pattern: phantom ships appearing to help those in danger, then vanishing without a trace. Slavers found their operations destroyed by unknown attackers. Entire convoys of captives freed and transported to safe ports with no explanation. Natural disasters on primitive worlds were met with anonymous aid. food and medical supplies appearing as if from nowhere. Rescue teams working with impossible efficiency before disappearing, and each time, small clues pointed toward human origin English transmissions. Ship configurations similar to old human designs. Tactical approaches that emphasize protecting civilians over military objectives. Rixton compiled his evidence into a comprehensive report and presented it to Speaker Quarix with growing urgency. "The Phantom Fleet is human," he stated flatly. "They've been operating throughout Council space for years, and more concerning, they have been protecting our citizens from threats we could not handle." Quarix's crystalline form flared with angry light. "Impossible. The barrier contains them. No human ship could penetrate our defenses." "Then explain the evidence," Rixton challenged, displaying the correlations and patterns he had discovered. "Explain the English transmissions, the technology that surpasses our own. The tactical emphasis on saving lives." Quarix stared at the data for a long moment before making his decision. "Find them and destroy them," he ordered coldly. "If humans are operating in our space, it is an act of war." On Haven Station, Nicole Price stood in the central command hub surrounded by holographic displays, showing the network's extent across the galaxy. Millions of humans now lived in the hidden facilities, children born in exile. 20 years after the exile, the Council faced a crisis they could not understand or control. Ships vanishing from secure space lanes. Stations reporting phantom signals that disappeared before investigation teams arrived, and most troubling of all, pirate operations being eliminated by unknown forces. Security Director Rixton had become obsessed with finding answers. His office walls covered with maps connecting thousands of incidents across 2 decades. And the pattern was unmistakable to anyone willing to see it. Someone was operating a massive intelligence network and military force completely invisible to Council sensors, protecting civilians and eliminating threats with efficiency that made official Council operations look incompetent by comparison. Rixton presented his findings to the full Council assembly, showing correlations that proved beyond doubt that a sophisticated organization had been active throughout their space for years. Speaker Quarix dismissed the report as paranoid speculation, insisting that no species could hide an entire fleet from Council surveillance. But Rixton noticed that several younger Council members looked troubled by the evidence. The answer came sooner than anyone expected, though not in the way Rixton had predicted. The colony world of New Haven sent a desperate distress signal that reached Council headquarters with the worst possible news. The Krell swarm had launched a full-scale invasion unlike the small raiding parties that had attacked Refuge years before. This was an assault fleet of hundreds of ships, carrying millions of warriors bred for conquest and slaughter. New Haven's defenses were overwhelmed in the first hour of fighting. The planetary shield generators destroyed by concentrated bombardment, and evacuation was impossible with Krell ships controlling orbital space. The nearest Council fleet was 6 days away at maximum speed. 6 days that the 40,000 colonists on New Haven did not have. Governor Philip Drake sent a final message accepting that his world was lost, asking only that the Council remember those who died here and avenge them against the Krell menace. Then something impossible happened. Sensors detected massive spatial distortions forming in orbit around New Haven, reality itself seeming to tear open as ships began appearing from nowhere. They were unlike anything in Council databases. Sleek vessels bristling with weapons that pulsed with energy signatures completely unknown to galactic science. The lead ship was 3 times the size of a Council dreadnought, its hull so black it seemed to absorb light, and on its bow was painted a symbol that made Rixton's hearts race when he saw the footage, a torch illuminating stars. The Phantom Fleet had revealed itself at last. Admiral Eric Young stood on the bridge of the Nightfall, watching his tactical display show Krell positions around the doomed colony. All ships Engage at will, he ordered calmly. Protect the civilians. Disable enemy vessels when possible. Destroy them if necessary. The human fleet struck with coordinated precision that stunned the Krell commanders. Weapons that fired beams of coherent energy punched through Krell shields as if they were paper. And missiles that tracked with impossible accuracy destroyed weapon emplacements while leaving crew sections intact. Commander Sarah Mitchell led a squadron of destroyers in a daring run through the Krell formation. Her ships weaving between enemy vessels too quickly for their targeting systems to track. Disabling engines and weapons with surgical strikes, the Phoenix took fire from 3 Krell heavy cruisers simultaneously, her shields flaring bright as they absorbed energy that should have vaporized the ship. And she returned fire with weapons that sent all 3 attackers tumbling out of control on the ground. Krell warriors who had already landed found themselves facing an enemy they had not anticipated. Human dropships descended through the atmosphere despite heavy fire, their shields holding against attacks that would destroy normal craft. And elite soldiers in advanced armor deployed to defend civilian population centers. Captain Brandon Lewis led his company into the city of New Promise, finding Krell shock troops herding civilians toward transport ships. Light them up, Brandon ordered, and his soldiers opened fire with weapons that stunned rather than killed, dropping Krell warriors into unconsciousness while avoiding harm to the terrified colonists within 3 hours. The battle was over. The Krell invasion fleet was destroyed or disabled, their ground forces captured or driven off, and 40,000 colonists stood staring at the human soldiers who had appeared from nowhere to save them. Governor Drake approached Brandon carefully, uncertain if these mysterious rescuers were friends or simply different enemies. "Who are you?" the governor asked, looking at the humans who had removed their helmets to reveal very human faces. Brandon smiled and extended his hand. "We're the ones who've been watching over you for 20 years, he said simply. "We're human." The word sent shock through the colony and through the council when footage of the battle reached their headquarters. The species exiled 2 decades ago, supposedly contained behind an impenetrable barrier, had just saved a council world with technology that surpassed anything the galactic community possessed. Rickson felt vindication and dread in equal measure as he watched the recordings of human ships in action. Vindication because his theory had been proven correct. Dread because the implications were staggering. If humans could defeat a major Krell invasion force this easily, what else were they capable of? Speaker Korix called an emergency session of the full council, his crystalline form pulsing with agitated colors as he addressed the assembly. "The humans have violated the terms of their exile," he declared. "They have operated in our space illegally for years, built military forces in secret, and intervened in our affairs without authorization." A young representative from the Talarian Union stood to respond, her voice steady despite the political risk of contradicting the speaker. "They saved 40,000 lives," she pointed out. "They defeated an enemy that our own fleet could not have reached in time. Should we punish them for protecting our citizens?" Heated debate erupted across the chamber, some species demanding that humanity be hunted down and destroyed for their deception, others arguing that the Phantom Fleet's actions proved humans were not the threat. The exile had claimed Edrix, then stood and requested permission to speak, his reputation as a cautious and methodical investigator giving weight to his words. "I have spent 5 years studying the Phantom Fleet's activities," he said. "In that time, they have saved hundreds of thousands of council lives, eliminated pirate and slaver operations that our forces could not touch, and provided aid to primitive worlds suffering natural disasters." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "In 20 years of secret operations, they have never once harmed an innocent being, never stolen resources, never acted in their own interests at the expense of others. They have been better protectors of council citizens than we have been ourselves." Coryx's light flared angry red. They defied our authority, built weapons in secret, operated outside all laws and regulations. They did what they had to do to survive an unjust exile. Rixton interrupted, his voice hard, and in the process, they became exactly what we needed even if we were too proud to admit it. The debate raged for hours, but no decision was reached before another message arrived from New Haven Governor. Drake appeared on the chamber's central display, standing beside Admiral Eric Young on the bridge of the Nightfall. "This is a message to the Galactic Council," Drake began. "I speak as a representative of the 40,000 people whose lives were saved today by human intervention." He gestured to Eric, who stepped forward with calm dignity. "My name is Admiral Eric Young, commander of the Free Human Coalition," Eric said, addressing the council that had exiled his species 2 decades before. "For 20 years, humanity has operated in the shadows of your civilization, protecting your people while you claimed we were too dangerous to exist among you." He activated a holographic display showing hundreds of incidents where human ships had intervened to save lives. "We prevented disasters, eliminated threats, and asked for nothing in return," Eric continued. "We did this because it was right, not because we sought recognition or reward." His expression hardened. "But we will not remain in the shadows forever. The barrier you placed around human space will be dismantled. The technology you stole from us will be returned, and humanity will take its rightful place in the galactic community as equals." Coryx started to object, but Eric raised a hand. "If you refuse, we will continue protecting innocent beings throughout the galaxy, but we will also defend ourselves against any aggression. You have seen what our technology can do. Imagine what we could accomplish if we were not forced to hide." The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. Rixton looked at the blank display where Eric's image had been and felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. Fear because humanity had clearly become powerful enough to challenge the entire council if they chose to do so. Hope because perhaps, just perhaps, the galaxy was about to gain the allies it desperately needed. Whether the proud species of the council wanted to admit it or not, in New Haven, colonists approached the human soldiers cautiously, offering food and water and thanks. And children who had been taught to fear humans instead saw heroes who had risked everything to save them. The galaxy would never be the same after today. The secret was out, and humanity. The Council's response to Admiral Young's message was swift and uncompromising. Operation Purge would find and destroy the human fleet regardless of their claims of peaceful intent. Speaker Coryx authorized the largest military mobilization in Civilization Council history, calling upon every member species to contribute warships to a combined armada that would hunt down the Phantom Fleet and eliminate the human threat once and for all. Security Director Rixton was given command of the operation. Despite his private reservations, the Council leadership, believing his methodical nature would prevent the humans from escaping through clever tactics, 300 Council warships assembled in the Nexus system, representing the combined military might of 50 different species. The largest fleet ever gathered for a single operation. Rixton stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Justice, studying intelligence reports that claimed to have located a major human facility in the Void Reaches, an empty sector between major civilizations where no known planets or resources existed. It makes sense they would hide there, his tactical officer noted. No commercial traffic, no reason for patrols. Perfect location for a secret base. Rixton nodded slowly, but something felt wrong about the intelligence. The information had come too easily, appeared in too many channels simultaneously, as if someone wanted the Council to find it. Maintain full alert status, he ordered. This could be a trap. The Armada jumped into the Void Reaches in perfect formation, 300 warships ready for battle. But their sensors detected nothing except empty space. "Scan for any anomalies," Rixton commanded. "Check for cloaked vessels, subspace signatures, anything unusual," before the sensor officers could respond. Reality itself seemed to shift around the Council fleet ships materialized from nowhere. Dozens of them forming a perfect sphere around the Armada with the massive black dreadnought Nightfall at their center. Admiral Eric Young's voice reached every Council vessel simultaneously, his image appearing on every screen, regardless of communication settings. "You are allowed to find us," Eric said calmly, looking directly at the camera as if he could see each individual crew member. "You were allowed to bring your entire fleet here, because we wanted you to understand what humanity has become." Rixton felt his scales tighten with tension. If this was a trap, his entire fleet was at the humans' mercy. Eric continued speaking, his tone more sad than angry. 20 years ago, the Council exiled my species based on fear rather than fact. You claimed we were too aggressive, too militaristic, too dangerous to exist among civilized species. The display changed to show historical footage of the exile. Families being forced from their homes, colonies abandoned, the barrier activating around Earth. "So we left," Eric said. "We retreated behind your barrier, and you congratulated yourselves on containing the threat. But you also did something else that day." New footage appeared, showing Council security forces seizing human research facilities during the evacuation. "You stole our technology." Eric's voice turned hard. "The jump drives that power every ship in your fleet. The medical advances that have saved billions of Council lives. The exotic matter research that revolutionized your energy production. All of it based on human innovations you claimed as your own." Shocked murmurs ran through the Council ships as crew members saw evidence they had never been shown. Technical documents proving that core Council technologies had originated from human research. "We could have responded with violence," Eric continued. "We could have built weapons and struck back at those who wronged us. But we chose a different path." The display showed hundreds of incidents over 20 years. Human ships rescuing Council citizens, eliminating pirates and slavers, providing disaster relief. Always helping and never asking for anything in return. "We protected you," Eric said simply. "We saved your lives, defended your colonies, ensured your children grew up safe, all while you claimed we were too dangerous to exist." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the assembled fleet. "Now I will give you a choice," Eric said, his voice formal and final. "Acknowledge the wrongful exile. Dismantle the barrier around human space. Return what you stole. And grant humanity equal standing in the galactic community." Rixton waited for the other option, knowing ultimatums always came with consequences. "Or refuse," Eric continued. "And humanity will continue operating as we have been, protecting innocent beings throughout the galaxy, but now openly defending ourselves against any aggression, before anyone could respond." Every weapon system on every Council ship suddenly went dark. Targeting computers shut down. Missile tubes locked closed. Energy weapons failed to charge. And defensive shields dropped to minimal power. Panic erupted across the Armada as crew members frantically tried to restore their systems. But nothing worked. "We have complete control of your vessels," Eric announced, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We could destroy every ship in this fleet without firing a single shot. We could leave you drifting helpless in the void." The systems began to restore themselves one by one, weapons and shields coming back online as the Council crews watched in helpless horror. "But we will not," Eric said, "because that is not who we are. We could have been your enemies, but we chose to be your protectors. We could have sought revenge, but we chose mercy." The human ships began to fade from sensors, disappearing back into whatever dimension they had emerged from. "You have one standard month to make your decision," Eric's final words echoed through the fleet. Choose wisely, because the galaxy is changing, whether you accept it or not. The Council Armada was left alone in the void reaches. Their weapons restored, but their pride shattered. Rixton opened a priority channel to the Nightfall before it could disappear completely. Admiral Young. This is Security Director Rixton. I request a private communication. A moment of silence. Then Eric's image appeared on Rixton's personal screen. I'm listening. Director. Rixton chose his words carefully. Knowing this conversation could determine the fate of billions, you say you want peace and recognition, he began. But what will happen to Council species if we refuse and war breaks out between our civilizations? Eric's expression softened slightly. We do not want war, he said honestly. We want justice. We want the opportunity to contribute to galactic civilization as equals rather than operate from the shadows. But if the Council refuses, then we will continue doing what we have always done, Eric interrupted. Protecting those who cannot protect themselves, regardless of whether they appreciate it or not. Humanity learned long ago that doing what is right matters more than receiving recognition for it. Rixton studied the human admiral, seeing genuine conviction in his eyes. Why save us? He asked quietly. Why protect the very species that exiled you? Eric smiled, a sad expression that carried the weight of 20 years of exile. Because the innocent people of the Council are not responsible for the decisions their leaders made, he said. Because children deserve to grow up safe regardless of what species they belong to. Because strength without compassion is tyranny, and power without responsibility is evil. He leaned forward slightly. We protect others because we can and because it is right. Those are the only reasons we meet. The communication ended, and Rixton sat in silence for a long moment before opening a channel to the Council chambers. He had a report to make, and for the first time in his career, he would recommend a course of action that went against the Speaker's wishes. The Council had a choice to make, and Rixton intended to make sure they understood exactly what was at stake on Haven Station. Nicole Price watched the transmission from the void reaches alongside millions of other humans throughout the Shadow Network. Phase 2 was complete. The Council now knew that humanity existed, knew what they were capable of, and had been given a clear choice. She looked around at the faces of men and women who had spent years living in disguise, sacrificing their identities to build the intelligence network that made this moment possible. Whatever they decide, she said to her team, we have already proven that we belong among the stars. They had been exiled as criminals and treated as threats, but they had responded by becoming the galaxy's unexpected protectors. Now the Council would have to decide whether to accept allies who had already proven their worth, or reject them and face the consequences of making enemies of the most resourceful and determined species in the galaxy. The month-long deadline began counting down, and across Council space, beings from 100 worlds debated the question that would define the future. What do you do when those you fear most prove to be exactly what you needed all along? The month-long deadline passed with the Council more divided than at any point in its 10,000-year history. Younger species and those saved by the Phantom Fleet advocated passionately for accepting humanity's terms, while older prideful species led by Speaker Quarks refused to negotiate with beings they still considered criminals. Debate raged in the Council chambers day after day with no resolution. Proposals and counter-proposals were drafted and rejected, and the galactic community fractured along ideological lines that threatened centuries of cooperation. Then, the Krell Swarm made the decision for a theme: a massive invasion fleet emerged from beyond the rim. Hundreds of thousands of ships carrying billions of warriors bred for conquest. And this time, they were not targeting a single colony, but launching simultaneous assaults across a dozen Council sectors within 3 days. 6 colony worlds fell to the Krell onslaught. Their defense is overwhelmed by sheer numbers and savage ferocity. Council fleet mobilized immediately, but found themselves outmatched by an enemy that seemed endless. For every Krull ship destroyed, 2 more appeared to take its place. Casualties mounted into the millions as the Krull advance continued unchecked. And desperate calls for help flooded into Council headquarters from 100 threatened worlds. Speaker Quarix stood before the emergency assembly with his crystalline form dim with defeat. "We cannot stop them," he admitted, his voice cracking like breaking glass. "Our forces are insufficient to defend all threatened systems. We must abandon the outer colonies and consolidate our defenses around core worlds." The pronouncement meant condemning tens of millions to death or slavery, but no one could offer an alternative until they aimed. The Nightfall appeared in orbit above the Council homeworld. Admiral Eric Young's transmission reached the assembly directly, interrupting their desperate deliberations. "We are aware of the Krull invasion," he said without preamble. "The Free Human Coalition is deploying our full fleet to defend Council worlds immediately." Quarix's form flared angry red. "We did not request your assistance. You do not have the luxury of pride." Eric interrupted coldly. "Billions of innocent lives are at stake. We will not stand by and watch them die while you debate politics." The transmission ended before Quarix could respond across a dozen battlefronts. Human ships appeared from subspace and engaged the Krull. With devastating effectiveness, Admiral Eric Young personally led the defense of the agricultural world of green fields. His fleet of 50 warships facing a Krull armada of 300. The battle should have been a massacre, but human technology turned it into route energy weapons that could punch through Krull bioarmor like paper. Missiles that tracked with impossible accuracy, shields that absorbed attacks the Krull could not penetrate, and tactical coordination that made the human fleet fight as a single organism within 6 hours. The Krull attack on green fields was broken, their ships destroyed or fleeing in disarray, and the human fleet immediately jumped to the next threatened system. Commander Sarah Mitchell led a daring rescue operation on the occupied world of Hope's Landing, landing troops under fire to evacuate civilians trapped behind Krull lines. Captain Brandon Lewis and his elite soldiers fought through Krull positions with weapons that stunned rather than killed, gathering terrified families and loading them onto evacuation ships. "We do not leave anyone behind," Brandon told his troops as they cleared building after building, and they took casualties to ensure the promise was kept. In orbit above Hope's Landing, the Phoenix engaged 3 Krull dreadnoughts simultaneously. Sarah's tactical skills and superior technology, allowing her to defeat enemies that should have destroyed her ship, crossed the galaxy. Human vessels appeared wherever the Krull attacked, fighting alongside Council forces who found themselves working with the very species they had exiled 20 years before. Security Director Rixthan commanded the Council defense of the industrial hub of Forge Station, his fleet struggling against overwhelming Krull numbers until human reinforcements arrived, watched in awe as human ships coordinated with his vessels without hesitation, sharing tactical data and covering weaknesses in the Council formation. Human vessel Phoenix. "This is Director Rixthan," he transmitted. "Thank you for the assistance." Sarah Mitchell's response was immediate and warm. "We are all on the same side when innocent lives are threatened. Director, let us show these Krull that humanity and the Council fight better together." The combined fleet turned the tide at Forge Station, pushing the Krull back with coordinated strikes that leveraged the strengths of both human and Council technology. Similar scenes played out across 100 battlefields as an unofficial alliance formed in the heat of combat. Humans and Council species fighting side by side against a common enemy. The turning point came at the Battle of Unity Prime, the Council capital world itself, where the Krull committed their entire reserve fleet in an attempt to decapitate Galactic leadership. Admiral Eric Young brought every available human ship to defend the homeworld. 200 vessels appearing in perfect formation to face the Krell Armada. The battle raged for 18 hours, the longest and bloodiest engagement of the war. Human ships fighting with desperate courage to protect the world whose leaders had exiled them. The Nightfall took damage from concentrated Krell fire, her shields failing under sustained bombardment. But Eric refused to retreat while civilians on Unity Prime remained in danger when Krell boarding parties breached the hull. Human Marines fought them in brutal close-quarters combat, defending their ship corridor by corridor. Finally, Council reinforcements arrived from all across the galaxy, every available warship converging on Unity Prime in a massive show of force. The combined Human Council fleet destroyed the Krell Armada completely, ending the invasion in a decisive victory that would be remembered for generations. But the cost had been high. Thousands of human and council crew members died in the fighting, including Commander Sarah Mitchell. Commander Sarah Mitchell, who sacrificed her ship to protect the Council hospital station from Krell bombardment in the aftermath of victory. Speaker Corix stood before the Council assembly with his once proud bearing diminished by the reality of what had occurred. Humanity saved us, he admitted quietly. They fought for our worlds when we had exiled them. They died protecting our citizens when we called them criminals. He paused, his crystalline form pulsing with colors that indicated deep emotional conflict. I move that we rescind the exile decree immediately, dismantle the barrier, offer full reparations for stolen technology, and grant humanity complete membership in the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges. The vote was unanimous on Earth. President Michelle Sanders stood in the observation deck watching as the quantum barrier flickered and died after 20 years of imprisonment. Stars, long hidden, became visible again. And across 12 human systems, billions celebrated their freedom. Michelle broadcast to all humanity, those on Earth and those in the shadow stations throughout the galaxy. We return to the stars, not as conquerors, but as partners. She declared, we have proven through sacrifice and service that we deserve our place among civilized species. Neko Price appeared before the Council in her true human form for the first time in 15 years. The genetic disguises removed to reveal the woman who had coordinated the intelligence network from the shadows. She was offered the position of ambassador to the Tellarian Union, the species whose appearance she had worn for so long. I accept, she said simply, and I promise to build bridges between our peoples based on the trust we earned through action. 5 years after the Krell War ended, Haven Station was transformed into Humanity Station, a massive diplomatic and commercial hub where species from across the galaxy gathered to trade, learn, and cooperate. Admiral Eric Young, now retired, walked through corridors filled with humans and aliens working together. Children of different species playing without fear or prejudice. A young Tellarian child approached him shyly, looking up at the elderly human with wide eyes. Sir, why did humans help us even when we exiled you? The child asked innocently. Eric knelt down to the child's level and smiled warmly. Because we learned long ago that strength without compassion is tyranny, he explained gently. And that power without responsibility is evil. We protect others because we can and because it is right. The child thanked him and ran off to play with human children nearby. Eric watched them go, reflecting on the journey humanity had taken from exiled outcasts to the galaxy's protectors. They had not built their empire through conquest or fear, but through 20 years of service performed in the shadows, saving lives and asking nothing in return. Now, stepping into the light at last, humanity would prove that the greatest empires are not those built on the ruins of the defeated, but those constructed on foundations of sacrifice and hope. Above Humanity Station, ships from 100 species came and went in peace, each one carrying beings who knew that somewhere in the darkness, humans had watched over them, protected them, and proven that exile could not diminish the spirit of a species determined to do what was right. The torch humanity carried illuminated the entire galaxy now, a light that would never be extinguished. And the empire they forged was one of hope, justice, and the simple truth that those with power have a responsibility to protect those without it. This was humanity's legacy, not of war or conquest, but of an entire,